Hello students, welcome to AK Classes and my name is Akashkohli. Today's video is on IELTS Listening Module and you are going to practice multiple choice questions. Please try to pause the video before starting any of the practice tests and read all the questions with options in detail. For tips and tricks, you can watch my previous video and the link is in the description. Good luck. Let us read all the questions first and mark the keywords like nouns, verbs or numbers.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, we've looked at various aspects of staff selection this term, and I think by now you should be beginning to see how much more there is to it than just putting applicants through a short interview or asking the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think you should be ready for today's tutorial on matching the person to the job. We're going to talk today about the importance of choosing that all-round right person.
Right, so we have to put ourselves into the role of the manager or supervisor.
Yes, and then we're going to imagine how different applicants would fit into the team or group they have to work with. We'll look at some examples later.
It's just theoretical at the moment.
Yes. The point is, you can select someone, even a friend, who has all the right qualifications, degrees, certificates, whatever. You can also check that they have a lot of experience, that they've done the sort of tasks that you want them to do in your office already, in a similar environment. But if they start work, and you realise that they just don't get along with everybody else, that, say, they've got sharply contrasting views on how something will work, well, with the best will in the world, you may be backing a loser.
Wouldn't it be just a question of company training, though?
Not always, particularly in a team situation. And I think it's important to think in terms of that type of working environment. People have to have faith in each other's ability to carry out the task their boss has set them. They have to trust that everyone will do their part of the job. And you can't necessarily train people for this.
But it's like trying to find out what someone's personality is like in a job interview. I mean, you just can't do that. Even if you try, you won't find out what they're really like until they actually start work.
Well, in most interviews, you usually ask candidates questions about their hobbies and what they like doing in their spare time, that sort of thing. So, employers are already involved in the practice of, well, doing part of the task.
But it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you if they're easygoing or hate smokers or whatever.
Well, arguably, it does give you a bit of information about an applicant's character.
So students, what I think the answer for first is B, and for second it is C, and for third it is A, and for fourth I think so it is C. Now you can pause the video and read all the questions first.
Excuse me, I was told to come here for advice about management diploma courses.
You've certainly come to the right place. Hi, my name is Monica.
Nice to meet you. My name is Andrew Harris.
So, Andrew, have you seen our diploma course prospectus yet?
Yes, I've already looked at it. In fact, I thought the information on course content was really useful. but I'm afraid I'm a bit confused by all the different ways you can do the course. Full-time intensive, part-time, and so on.
Well, let's see if I can help. I think each course type has its advantages and disadvantages, so it really depends on you, your own study habits, and your financial circumstances, of course. Are you working at the moment?
Yes, I've been working in the administration section of the local hospital for the last 3 years. And before that, I worked in the office of a computer engineering company for 2 years. So I've got about 5 years of relevant work experience. And what I'm hoping to focus on is personnel management.
I see. And are you planning to leave your current job to study, or are you thinking about just taking a year off?
I want to know what my options are, really. I don't want to quit my job or anything, and my employers are keen for me to get some more qualifications, but obviously it would be better if I could do a course without taking too much time away from work.
Right. So you don't really want to do the full-time course, then?
No, not really. It's also a question of finances. You see, my office have agreed to pay the cost of the course itself, but I would have to take unpaid leave if I want to study full-time, and, well, I don't think I could afford to support myself with no salary for a whole year.
Okay. Well, you have two other possibilities. You could either do the part-time course, that would be over 2 years, and you wouldn't have to take any time off work, or you could do what we call a modular course. You could do that in 18 months if you wanted, or longer. It's quite flexible, and it would be up to you.
Please pause the video for 30 seconds.
Right. I've now almost succeeded in finalising plans for our tour, so I'll bring you up to date with what I know. As you know, we're flying first to Munich on Monday the 4th. The flight is at 11:30, so it's too early to have lunch at the airport. I suggest we meet there for coffee at 10. Which should give us plenty of time for breakfast before we leave home. When we arrive in Munich, we'll be met at the airport by Klaus Bauer. Klaus works for a tour operator, and he'll look after us for the time we'll be in Germany. He's already liaised with the managers of the theatres we're going to visit, and he's also arranged for an officer of the National Theatre in Munich to show us round the theatre one afternoon during our stay. Now, last time we discussed this trip, I didn't have the precise cost for hotel rooms, but now I have. The normal rate at the hotel where we're staying is €150 a night for a double room. I'd hoped to get that down to €120, but in fact I've been able to negotiate a rate of €110. That'll be reflected in the final payment, which you'll need to make by the end of this week. On Tuesday, the day after our arrival, I had hoped we could sit in on a rehearsal at one of the theatres, but unfortunately that's proved very difficult to arrange. So instead, we'll have a coach trip to one of the amazing castles in the mountains south of Munich. On Tuesday evening, we'll all have dinner together in a restaurant near our hotel. From talking to you all about your preferences, it was clear that a typical local restaurant would be too meat-oriented for some of you. Some of you suggested an Italian restaurant, but I must confess that I decided to book a Lebanese one, as we have plenty of opportunities to go to an Italian restaurant at home. On Wednesday afternoon, the director of the play we're going to see that evening will talk to us at the theatre. She'll describe the whole process of producing a play, including how she chose the actors and, as the play we're going to see is a modern one, how she worked with the playwright.
Please pause the video for 30 seconds.
Oh, good morning. You must be James. I'm Beth Cartwright. Please call me Beth.
Thank you.
Now, as this is your first tutorial since you started on the Scandinavian Studies course, I'd like to find out something about you. Why did you decide to take this course?
Well, my mother is Danish, and although we always lived in England, she used to talk about her home a lot, and that made me want to visit Denmark. We hardly ever did, though. My mother usually went on her own. But whenever her relations or friends were in England, they always came to see us.
I see. So I assume you already speak Danish, one of the languages you'll be studying?
I can get by when I talk to people, though I'm not terribly accurate.
Now, you probably know that you'll spend the third year of the course abroad. Have you had any thoughts about that?
I'm really looking forward to it. And although Denmark seems the obvious place to go because of my family connections, I'd love to spend the time in Iceland.
Oh, I'm sure it can be arranged. Do you have any plans for when you graduate? A lot of students go on to take a master's degree.
I think the 4 years of the undergraduate course will be enough for me. I'm interested in journalism, and I quite like the idea of moving to Scandinavia and writing for magazines. I'd find that more creative than translating, which I suppose most graduates do.
Okay. Now, how are you finding the courses you're taking this term, James?
Well, I'm really enjoying the one on Swedish cinema.
That'll continue next term. But the one on Scandinavian literature that's running at the moment will be replaced by more specialized courses. Oh, and by the way, if you're interested in watching Danish television programs, there's going to be a course on that the term after next.
That sounds good.
Have you started thinking about the literature paper that you have to write in the next few weeks?
Yes, my first choice would be to do something on the Icelandic sagas.
The trouble with that is that a lot of people choose that topic, and it can be difficult to get hold of the books you'll need. Why not leave that for another time?
Right.
You might find modern novels or 19th century playwrights interesting.
I've read or seen several plays in translation, so that would be a good idea.
Fine. I'll put you down for that topic.
Right. So what would you advise me to aim at in the paper?
First, I suggest you avoid taking one writer and going into a great deal of detail. That approach certainly has its place, but I think you first need to get an understanding of the literature in the context of the society in which it was produced, who it was written for, how it was published, and so on. I also think that's more fruitful than placing it within the history of the genre.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Pause the video for 30 seconds.
In this session in your training day, we're going to look at some of the more specialized holidays we offer at BC Travel. Now, the travel business is very competitive, and it's important to be aware of how the market's changing and developing. In terms of age groups, the over 65s are an important market, and one that's increasing steadily year on year. The fewest holidays are taken by the 31 to 42-year-olds, and that figure shows no sign of rising. The biggest market at present is still the youngest group, the 16 to 30s, but this group's also seen the biggest drop over the last few years, whereas there's a noticeable growth in the number of holidays taken by the 55 to 64-year-olds. As far as the 43 to 54-year-olds are concerned, bookings there are steady, but I have to say we haven't seen the increase we expected. One trend we're noticing with nearly all age groups is the growing popularity of holidays in which clients do some kind of specialized activity. I'm not talking here about adventure holidays where clients take part in high-risk activities like white water rafting just for the thrill of it. Activity holidays usually involve rather less high-risk sports or things like art and music. They're not necessarily cheaper than ordinary holidays, often the opposite, in fact, but they do often take place outside the main tourist centers, which gives an opportunity for clients to find out more about the local people and customs. And many say this is one of the most positive features of these holidays. Of course, they offer the chance to develop a new skill or talent, but clients often say that more than this, it's the chance to create lasting relationships with other like-minded people. That's the main draw.
Pause the video for 30 seconds.
Good afternoon. Last week, we discussed why people seek therapy. This week, we're going to look at one kind of psychotherapy called rational emotive therapy, or RET. But before we get started, I'd like to quote a first-century philosopher called Marcus Aurelius, whose words I think are apposite to this discussion. He wrote something like, "The universe is about change. Life is what thinking makes it." RET is also about accepting the world while changing thought patterns. RET was created by an American, Albert Ellis, in the 1950s. The main aim of RET is to develop healthy emotional responses to cope with unfortunate circumstances. Anger, anxiety, or depression is replaced with upset, followed by acceptance, then by moving on. Let's take the example of a person who is involved in a car accident. Of course, your physical injuries are your primary concern, and satisfactory medical assistance in hospital is critical. But how fast you heal after that assistance is not only determined by the kind of medical care you have received, but also by your attitude. You probably had no control over the accident, but you can control how you feel about it afterwards. Anxiety, guilt, and even rage at others involved are all mental states that you can overcome. Here's another scenario. Your sister borrowed some money from you a year or so ago and hasn't made any effort to give it back. A well-balanced person thinks, "Oh dear, never mind." But an unbalanced one says, "My sister should give me my money back. She mustn't do this to me." Or, "She's always been so selfish. She never treats me well." Now, people, including your sister, are both good and bad, and they do change. Imagining how awful your circumstances are doesn't help. You're far more likely to get your money back if your sister knows you don't judge her and you avoid words like should, must, always, and never. One of Albert Ellis's fundamental beliefs was that too many people these days awfulize. Yes, he even coined the term, to awfulize. He considered that people make things seem awful that really aren't. They disable themselves through anxiety rather than accepting the challenges there are in modern life. To introduce his ideas to the world, Ellis came up with the ABC scheme. In this, A stands for adversity, something out of the ordinary that causes difficulty. Ellis was convinced that when A struck, it was B, a person's beliefs, that often affected them more than A itself. This leads to C, or consequences. Some of these could be relatively minor, like headaches or skin disorders, but others could be serious and debilitating, like long-term mental illness. Ellis added D to his ABC scheme. This means a person distinguishes between awfulizing and healthy beliefs. During this process of distinguishing, a person's mental worldview undergoes a significant change, and as a result, he or she makes a genuine recovery.
Please pause the video for 30 seconds.
Good morning. It's great to see so many people here. Thank you all very much for coming. Well, as you know, the community gardens at Hadley Park are really not looking as good as they should. Quite bad, really. And although the local council has a budget to deal with some of the problems, we do need volunteers for other tasks. If you don't mind, I'm going to divide you into two groups. So everyone on this side of the room is Group A, and the rest of you are Group B. So, Group A, there are a couple of things we'd like you to help with. First of all, don't worry about any litter or empty bottles you see lying about. One of the local schools has offered to help out with that as part of their own environmental project. The priority for you will be to give us a hand with the new wooden fencing. It needs constructing along parts of the bicycle track, as there are parts which have now fallen down or broken, as I'm sure you've seen. You've probably also noticed that some of the pathways that come from the bicycle track are quite narrow, and there are plans to make them wider, but the council will be dealing with that later in the year. And they've also promised to produce some informational signs about the plants in the gardens. Hopefully, they'll be up in a few weeks' time. The other thing we're doing is getting rid of some of the foreign species that are growing in the gardens and putting back some native plants and trees. So you'll be doing some digging for us and getting those into the ground. So, Group A, there's some items you'll need to bring along with you. I was going to say raincoats, but the forecast has changed, so you can leave those at home. I'd definitely recommend a strong pair of boots. Waterproof would be best. It's quite muddy at the moment, and your own gloves would also be advisable. Tools will be available, spades and hammers, that kind of thing. You just need to make sure they go back in the trucks. And, there's no need to worry about food and drink, as we'll be supplying sandwiches and coffee, possibly some biscuits even.
So now this is the last practice test, and you can pause the video for 1 minute. Good luck.
Well, James, I've had a look over your case study, and for a first draft, it looks promising.
I have to be honest, when you told us we had to write about a furniture company, it didn't sound like the kind of thing that would interest me. But since then, I've changed my mind.
Why's that?
Well, as you know, Furniture Rossi is an Australian company, still comparatively small compared to some of the high street stores, but it's got plans to expand into foreign markets, so I chose it for that reason. It's going through a transition. It's a family-run business aiming to build a global brand.
All right, and you've made that clear in your writing. One thing, though, that I think you've overlooked is why Luca Rossi started a furniture company here in Australia in the first place.
Well, he'd just got an arts degree, hadn't he? and people were trying to talk him into an academic profession, but he wanted a practical job, something he thought would be more satisfying in the long run. His grandfather had been a craftsman, he'd made furniture in Italy, and he'd passed this skill on to Luca's father. And, well, Luca thought he'd like to continue the tradition.
Yes, that was the motivation behind his decision. And what was it, do you think, that gave Furniture Rossi a competitive edge over other furniture companies?
I wouldn't think it was price. It's always been at the higher end of the market. But according to my research, it was to do with the attitude of the employees. They were really focused on giving good customer service.
Yes, Luca Rossi insisted on that. Their promotional campaigns also emphasised the fact that the wood only came from Australian forests. But that was the case with their rivals too, so it wouldn't have made them stand out. OK, we'll have a careful look at the content of your case study in a minute, but I just want to make a general comment first before you start writing your second draft.
OK.
Yes, what I'd like to see more of is your opinion. A bit more critical thinking rather than the bare facts. But it's good to see you've been careful with your referencing this time.
Thanks. And I read and reread my work, so I'm pretty sure there aren't any errors with the language.
Yes, it's fine. Oh, but there's one other thing I could probably mention at this point.
Yes?
Well, at the end of term, you'll also be giving a presentation, also on Furniture Rossi.
Yes. I haven't given it much thought yet.
Understandably, but while you're writing the case study, I'd recommend you think about what kind of information would be suitable to use in your presentation. Remember, the last time you gave a presentation on a company, you spent a considerable part of the time providing the audience with financial data. But they probably needed to hear more about company strategy.
Yes. I did concentrate rather too much on the figures. I'll make sure there's a balance this time.
Good.
Please check your answers and write your scores in the comment section. Thank you.